Nobody told the boy what grief was supposed to look like. Not the school counselors who called home twice a week, not the therapists who came to the house with their soft voices and their careful silences. Not his father, who was, by every measurable standard, one of the most powerful women in the country, and who stood outside her son's bedroom door some nights with her hand flat against the wood, unable to knock. Her name was Adaora Mensa Osi, and she had built a software company from a basement suite in Scarborough into something worth $430 million, and she did not know how to talk to her 9-year-old son about his father. Kwiku had been gone 14 months. Aneurysm. A Tuesday. He had been making oatmeal. She thought about that a lot. The oatmeal, the mundaneness of it. The sleigh death had come in through the ordinary and taken everything. Her son's name was Kofi. He had his father's forehead and her mother's stubborn mouth, and since the Tuesday with the oatmeal, he had not cried once in front of another person. The school said he was withdrawn. The therapist said he was processing. Adaora said nothing to either of them, because she was doing the same thing, moving through her days like a woman underwater, breathing just enough. She had 3 assistants, a driver, a housekeeper who came Tuesdays and Fridays, and a rotating cast of babysitters who Kofi tolerated the way he tolerated the dentist. Politely, distantly, as though they were happening to someone else. The last one had quit in March. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter that said only, "I think Kofi needs something I'm not able to give him." Adaora had read it standing at the island in her bathrobe at 6 in the morning before her first call, and she had folded it very carefully and put it in the recycling bin, and she had not let herself think about it until now. Now was a Wednesday in April, and she was sitting in her car in the underground parking garage of her own building, unable to go upstairs, because upstairs was a 9-year-old boy who had not spoken to her about anything that mattered in 14 months, and she did not know how to fix that. Her phone showed 43 unread messages. She put it face down on the seat. The agency sent someone the following Monday. Her name was Seraphine Dumont. She was from New Brunswick originally, and then Montreal, and then everywhere a little bit. Her mother had been a nurse, her father a teacher, and she had grown up in the spaces between institutions, comfortable with rules but not defined by them. She was 34 years old, and she had spent the last 6 years working with children who were, as she put it to Adaora during the interview, carrying something heavy. "What does that mean, practically?" Adaora said. She was sitting across from Seraphine in the kitchen, still in her work clothes, her laptop open on the counter behind her. She had 40 minutes before her next call. "It means I don't try to take the weight away," Seraphine said. "I just try to make sure they're not carrying it alone." Adaora looked at her for a moment. "My son doesn't talk, I know. You mentioned that. He's not rude. He's just elsewhere. Okay, the last 3 people we tried couldn't reach him." Seraphine nodded slowly. She had her hands folded in her lap and she was not fidgeting, which Adaora noticed because most people fidgeted when she looked at them directly. "That's all right," Seraphine said. "I'm not in a hurry." Adaora hired her that afternoon. Kofi did not speak to Seraphine for 6 days. He acknowledged her. He said good morning when she arrived. He sat at the table when she made lunch. He did his homework in the kitchen while she read in the living room. But he kept a careful and specific distance from her, the kind of distance that is not rudeness but something closer to self-protection, and Seraphine did not press it. She learned his rhythms. He woke at 7 and spent 20 minutes just lying there, which she knew because she could hear the absence of movement. He ate cereal but not toast. He did his reading homework first and his math last. He had a basketball in his room that he bounced against the wall sometimes at night, not hard, just rhythmically, like a heartbeat. On the 7th day, she was in the kitchen slicing apples when he came in and sat down at the counter without being asked. "What are you making?" he said. "Nothing yet. I'm just slicing apples." "Why? I like the smell." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My dad used to do that." He said it made the room smell like a house. Seraphine did not stop slicing. She did not turn to look at him. "Did it?" she said. "I don't know," Kofi said. "I guess. I didn't notice until he said it." "That's how those things work," Seraphine said. "You only know them after." She set a small dish of apple slices on the counter near him and went back to what she was doing. He ate them one at a time. Neither of them spoke again, but it was a different kind of silence, inhabited rather than empty. Adaora was in Vancouver when she got the first report from the agency. Standard check-in, everything was fine, routine. She called the house from her hotel room at 10 o'clock and Kofi answered, which he almost never did. "Hi," he said. "Hi, baby. How are you?" "Good." A pause. "Seraphine made potato soup." "Yeah? Was it good?" "It was okay. She put rosemary in it." I didn't know what rosemary was. Do you like it? It's all right. Another pause. She says it grows really fast, like you can grow it in a window. I looked it up. Adaora sat very still on the edge of the hotel bed. Outside the window, Vancouver was doing what Vancouver did in April, rain, soft and relentless. That's cool, she said, because she did not trust herself to say anything more complicated. Yeah, he yawned. Okay. Night, Mom. Good night, baby. I love you. Love you too. He hung up first, which he always did, and Adaora sat there for a long time with the phone in her lap. She flew back on Friday. Seraphine was gone by the time she arrived. She came weekdays 8 to 6, and Kofi was in the living room on the couch, watching a nature documentary about river otters with the focus of someone performing surgery. Adaora dropped her bag at the door and stood there watching him. He hadn't heard her come in. Or he had, and he was letting her exist quietly in the doorway, which was a thing he had started doing with her, this careful accommodation of her presence that was not yet warmth but was something in that direction. Hey, she said, hey. He did not take his eyes off the otters. They hold hands when they sleep so they don't drift apart. Otters? So they don't lose each other. She went and sat next to him on the couch, not close, just nearby. After a moment, without looking at her, he leaned slightly in her direction, just the smallest adjustment, the way a plant turns toward a window, and she did not make a thing of it. She just stayed. The question she was not letting herself ask was, why Seraphine and not me? She turned it over in private, in the small hours when she could not sleep. She was not jealous. That was not the right word. She was something more like undone by it. Her son was talking to a woman he had known for 3 weeks about rosemary and otters, and the way rooms smelled when his father was in them, and with her, with Adaora, he was still somewhere behind glass, visible but unreachable. She had built a company. She had kept the house running. She had made sure he had everything he needed, the therapist, the books, the food, the schedule. She had not fallen apart, because she could not afford to fall apart, because he needed at least one parent who was still standing. But maybe that was the thing. Maybe she had been so focused on standing that she had forgotten how to sit. It happened on a Thursday, 3 weeks in, and Adaora was not supposed to be home. She had a board meeting that ran long, and then a dinner she canceled, and she came back earlier than expected, maybe 3:30, and she let herself in quietly, because Kofi sometimes napped after school, and she didn't want to wake him. She heard his voice first. Not words, just the sound of it, low and unguarded, the voice he used before he remembered to be careful. She set her bag down without making noise and stood in the hallway. He was in the kitchen with Seraphine. She could see them through the doorway, Kofi sitting on the counter, which she had told him not to do, and Seraphine leaning against the opposite counter with a mug of something, and the afternoon light was coming in sideways through the window and making everything look like it was made of a softer material than it actually was. She doesn't know what to say, Kofi said. So she doesn't say anything. Seraphine was quiet for a moment. Then, do you know what to say? To her. No, so you're both just waiting for the other one. I guess that sounds really hard, Seraphine said. For both of you. She's sad too, Kofi said. I know that. I'm not stupid. I know you're not. She just doesn't show it. He picked at the edge of the counter. I wish she would. Like sometimes I think if she cried I could too. But she never does. Seraphine said quietly, have you told her that? How do you tell someone something like that? Adaora stood in the hallway. She was not moving. She was not breathing, not really. The words went into her chest and arranged themselves around something that had been lodged there for 14 months, and she felt it shift, just slightly, the way ice shifts in spring when the water starts to move beneath it. I don't know, Seraphine said. Sometimes you don't have to say it in words. What does that mean? It means sometimes you just go and sit next to someone, and that's enough. The kitchen was quiet. Adaora could hear the refrigerator. She could hear the sound of her son breathing. Then Kofi said, very quietly, not intending to be heard, not performing it for anyone, I miss him so much. And Seraphine said, I know, sweetheart, I know you do. Adaora pressed her back against the hallway wall. She brought one hand up to her mouth. She stood there in her own house, in her coat, with her bag on the floor, and she let herself cry. Silently and completely, for the first time since a Tuesday in February 14 months ago, when the hospital had called and everything had stopped. She did not go into the kitchen. She could not yet. She stayed in the hallway and she cried and she let it be what it was, and when it was over she wiped her face with the back of her hand and picked up her bag and went upstairs, and she sat on the edge of her bed and she breathed. She called the agency that evening. Anita, the woman she worked with, answered on the second ring. I wanted to ask about Seraphine, Adaora said. Is everything all right? Yes, everything's. Yes, she paused. I'm not calling about a problem. I'm calling because I want to make sure she stays. A small pause on the other end. That's wonderful. She's been excellent, from what I understands. She has, Adaora said. She's been, yes. She did not have better words than that. The next morning she came down early, before Seraphine arrived, and Kofi was already at the kitchen table with his cereal and his book. And Adaora made herself a coffee and sat across from him, which she did not usually do. She usually stood at the counter, eating on her way to something else. He looked up. You're sitting, he said. I know. He went back to his book. She drank her coffee. Outside the window, the maple was doing what it did in April. The buds were starting, the small, tight fists of them, not open yet but coming. After a few minutes, without looking up from his page, Kofi said, There's a kind of rosemary that works in Canadian winters. I looked it up. Yeah, you'd have to get a specific pot and keep it by the window that gets the most sun. He turned a page, the one in the living room, probably. Adaora looked at her son, at his father's forehead and her mother's stubborn mouth, and the way he held a book like it was a door he was trying to get through. Okay, she said. We could get one, he said, not looking at her, turning another page. If you wanted. I'd like that, she said. He nodded very slightly and went back to reading. She stayed at the table. She did not go to her laptop or her phone. She stayed and drank her coffee and watched the maple, and the morning came in through the window, slowly, incrementally, the way it always does. Seraphine had been with them 8 weeks when something shifted that Adaora had not expected. It did not happen dramatically. It happened the way most true things happen, without announcement, in the middle of something ordinary. Adaora had been working late, which was not unusual, and Seraphine had offered to stay, which she sometimes did when things ran long. Kofi was asleep by 9. The house was quiet. Adaora came downstairs at 10:30 to find Seraphine at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a crossword, and there was a second cup on the counter, not full but present, like a question. You didn't have to stay, Adaora said. I know. Seraphine looked up from the crossword. A 4-letter word for the part of a song that stays the same. Adaora poured herself the tea. Hook, she said. That's 5 motif. That's 5-2 hokor. Seraphine wrote it in. Maybe. She tilted her head. How was your day? Adaora sat down at the table. It was the first time she had sat at the kitchen table in the evening inn. She could not remember how long. Long, she said. But not bad. We closed a partnership. She paused. I don't usually talk about this stuff. You don't have to. I know. She wrapped both hands around the mug. It's just, I talk about it all day and then I come home and there's no one to tell the end of it to. Seraphine looked at her without saying anything, which was a thing Seraphine did well, this quality of attention that was not pressure, just presence. He used to ask, Adaora said. Kweku. He'd ask about my day and I'd say fine, long, and he'd say no, really. She stopped, pressed her lips together. Sorry, don't apologize, Seraphine said. I don't usually do this, I know. You've been here 8 weeks and I've barely said 10 words to you that weren't about Kofi's schedule. That's okay, Seraphine said. That's what I was here for. Adaora looked at her across the table. The kitchen was warm, the way kitchens get at night when the day has been cold and the light is low and there is tea. What else are you here for, she said. It was not a loaded question. Or it was, but not in a way either of them was ready to name. Seraphine smiled very slightly and looked back down at her crossword. Apparently, she said, to be terrible at crosswords. Adaora laughed. It came out of her before she could think about it, real and sudden and a little ragged around the edges, the way laughs are when they've been kept in too long. Seraphine looked up, and the look between them was brief and unresolved, but it was honest, and they both let it exist before they looked away. Spring arrived properly in May, the way it always does in Ontario, all at once. Insistent, like it had been planning this the whole time. Kofi found the rosemary at a garden center in Roncesvalles, a small pot of it that he carried very carefully to the car like it was fragile. He put it in the living room window that got the most sun, and he watered it every other day with a measuring cup, because Seraphine said too much water was worse than not enough. It grew. Adaora noticed it the way she had started noticing things again. Not all at once, but gradually, as if her attention was returning to her from wherever it had gone. The rosemary on the windowsill. The sound her son made when something was funny, a short, involuntary huff that was his father's laugh in miniature. The way the morning light moved across the kitchen floor between 7 and 8, slow and certain. She was paying attention again. That was what it was. One evening in the middle of May, she was in the kitchen starting dinner, and Kofi was at the counter doing homework, and Seraphine had stayed late again, not because she'd been asked, but because she and Adaora had gotten into a discussion about a podcast they'd both apparently been listening to, and neither of them had noticed the time. "You're both kind of intense," Kofi said, without looking up from his homework. "Excuse me?" Adaora said. "About the podcast." He wrote something in his notebook. "You have the same face when you talk about it." Seraphine and Adaora looked at each other across the kitchen island. "The same face." "What face?" Seraphine said. "Like you've figured something out," Kofi said. "Like you're explaining something to someone who doesn't get it yet." He erased something, rewrote it. "Dad used to do that too, when he was really into a book." The kitchen went quiet. Not the hollow quiet of before, a different kind, inhabited, the kind that has room in it for the people who are not there anymore. "He was always reading," Adaora said, carefully. "Yeah." Kofi did not stop writing. "Do you still have his books?" "They're in the study. Could I look at them sometime?" Adaora set down the wooden spoon she was holding. "Yes," she said. "Of course you can." Kofi nodded and went back to his homework. Seraphine was looking at the counter. Adaora looked at her son and felt something loosen in her chest, a tightness she had stopped noticing because it had been there so long. She asked Seraphine to stay for dinner. It was a Friday, and dinner was nothing special. Roasted chicken, the potatoes Kofi liked, a salad she assembled, while Seraphine helped Kofi finish the last of his homework at the table. They ate in the kitchen, not the dining room. The dining room was for company. The kitchen was for real life. Kofi told them about a kid at school who had brought a lizard in a pencil case, which Adaora was fairly certain was fictional but chose to take at face value. Seraphine said her cousin had once brought a frog to a piano recital. Kofi wanted to know if it had disrupted the performance. Seraphine said it had disrupted it considerably. After dinner, Kofi went upstairs to get ready for bed. The kitchen had the quality of evenings that have gone well. Dishes in the sink, the good kind of mess. "This is the most he's talked at dinner," Adaora said, not quite to Seraphine and not quite to herself. "He's coming back," Seraphine said quietly. "Yeah." Adaora looked at the table where he'd been sitting. "He is." She turned to face Seraphine, and she wasn't sure what she was about to say. Something true and probably clumsy and overdue. But before she could, Kofi appeared at the bottom of the stairs in his pajamas, holding a book with a cracked spine. "Mom," he said, "I found one of Dad's. It has his handwriting in the margins." Adaora went very still. "Can you read some of it?" Kofi said. "Tonight." "Like out loud?" She looked at him, at his father's forehead and her mother's mouth and the book in his hands that had belonged to Kwiku, with Kwiku's handwriting in it, small and slanted and going up the margins in the way it always had. "Yeah," she said. Her voice was steady. She did not know how. "Come here." He came and sat next to her on the bench at the kitchen table, and she opened the book to the first page that had writing on it. Seraphine had her coat already, was standing at the edge of the kitchen quietly. Adaora glanced at her once, just for a moment, and Seraphine smiled and nodded, the small, private nod of someone who knows when a room belongs to someone else. She let herself out. The door closed softly. Adaora read out loud. Kwiku's handwriting appeared in the margins, this and true and once, near the bottom of a page about memory, a single word that said yes. Kofi leaned against her arm, not performing closeness, just settling into it the way he used to before. The rosemary was on the windowsill. The kitchen smelled like dinner and the particular kind of warmth that houses hold after a long day when the people in them have finally put something down. Adaora read until her son fell asleep against her shoulder. Then she stayed very still, with the book in her lap and his weight on her arm, and she did not move for a long time, because she was not ready to let the moment end, and because this, exactly this, was what she had been carrying toward without knowing it. The rosemary grew in the window. The house held them. It was enough.